Hey Howard, I think it would be crazy of me to, get to sit down with Howard Levy and chat harmonica and not ask you about the whole project of playing the diatonic chromatically. So I'm kind of interested. I mean, there's a whole can of worms to open, but really, I mean, for me, I'm interested. What has motivated you to get this humble, limited instrument and kind of push its boundaries to do things that it kind of doesn't want to do naturally.
Well, I started out playing music when I was about 8.5 years old. My parents finally agreed to give me piano lessons, and I had been begging for piano lessons since I was probably 5. And I really don't have much memory of this, but they say that I used to sit at the piano when I was a kid. I don't have any memory of it, but as soon as I had my third piano lesson, I started improvising, just making up my own stuff. So I guess I had this natural tendency for being attracted to sound and having it organized in my mind and being able to listen to something and play it back, that kind of stuff. And so eventually, like not long after that, I started going to a really good music school, Manhattan School of Music, on Saturdays for piano and theory lessons. And I studied classical piano, but I always improvised. My teachers understood that. And so, as time went on, I started getting interested in rock and then blues. And when I got interested in blues and having gone to listen to some, not going to, let me try to be coherent here, hearing these great albums of Chicago blues harmonica players, and then going to hear some of these guys live when I was a teenager in New York City, in these little clubs in Greenwich Village, it just blew my mind. And I didn't at first think I was going to play harmonica, but I guess what drew me to it was that the ability to bend notes, and I love the sound, and not having to go to some giant 800-pound instrument sitting somewhere, to be able to take this thing with you. So I went to the most famous music store in New York, Manny's Music on West 48th Street, and I plunked down $2.25 for I think it was a blues harp in G or a marine band in G. And I went over to my friend's house who played harmonica, and I asked him, could you show me how to bend notes? And he couldn't. He said, I don't understand how I'm doing it. It's inside my mouth. It's invisible. So anyway, I sounded terrible on harmonica. I would carry it with me all the time and not be able to do anything. And finally, one day, in the first week of college in Evanston, which is just north of Chicago, where I still live, in 1969. It's a long story. I'll make it short. I went to a political rally. I came out. I thought, why don't I try playing harmonica again? And suddenly I bent a note. And then within a half hour, I bent all the draw notes and started playing these blues licks because I knew what they were supposed to sound like. I was already like playing a lot of jazz on piano. I'd been in rock bands. I knew a lot about music, and so like if I heard someone play, I mean, it took me like a minute or two to say, oh, that you bend the fourth hole, and you slide over those two holes. But it was really like the first day of the rest of my life when I discovered how to bend a note. And then, since I was playing all this advanced jazz and listening to Coltrane and all this stuff, and Eric Dolphy, and listening to Stravinsky, and so I'm playing this instrument, and I thought, why don't I try to play some scales? I'll play a G. It was a G harp, right? So, and then second position. I can't play the C sharp. It's not there. I thought, well, that's frustrating. And then just a simple blues lick. This is what really made me play, just look for other things. I couldn't play, I couldn't do the four chord, unless I went, and I thought, how come the F isn't there in the second octave? I mean, it's just not there. And being a piano player, I thought, well, it's a musical instrument. All the notes must be on it. That's why I failed math in high school. Irrational assumptions, right? So I'm going to start looking for it. And so after a few months of playing and messing around on this one harmonica that I had, I discovered how to do the blow bends, because I realized that you could bend the higher note on a hole down to just above the lower note. And so on the top, the blows are higher. So even though not too many of my personal harmonica heroes, like Paul Butterfield, never bent a note on the top, but some of those guys did. Little Walter didn't do it much either. James Cotton did some of it. And so I was excited when I found this. And the whole thing that started the overblowing, and I'll explain where I got the name from, terrible name, was I thought, well, if I can't get these notes by bending draw notes on the bottom, what happens if I try to bend a blow note on the bottom? That was just logical. If A doesn't work, try B. So I'm sitting around my dorm room, and one day, that note popped out, although not cleanly. But I thought, wow, what a cool sound, because I couldn't separate it from the note, And then I realized, not just a cool sound, it's the missing note, you idiot, So now I could go. So it was very exciting. And then if I thought, wait a minute, if I can get it in this one place, maybe all the other places on the instrument where the notes are missing, you could also get it. And so then I discovered that I could do it on the 4, 5th hole. So now in the middle of the harmonica, suddenly, so this is really exciting. And I went to a friend of mine who played saxophone in the Northwestern Jazz Band, where I was the pianist, okay? And I said, hey man, what is it when you play one note and you blow a little harder and another note pops out that's higher? And he said, well, it sounds like you're overblowing a harmonic. And of course, that's not what it is at all, but I didn't know anything. And so I said, oh, overblowing, okay. So I started calling it overblowing. I mean, what do I know about wind instruments? I was a piano player. Piano players, they sit down and you press a key and you get a note. No piano players know how a piano works. That's all inside. I mean, unless you study how to be a piano tuner and you discover that there's about 80 different parts of the action of a piano, which is like this amazing machine that all work together. And you have to like go to school and learn how to do this. So here's this instrument. They're all put together with nails back then. If I took it apart to look at it, it would be ruined. I could never get it back together again. So I had no idea how the reeds were doing this until years later. But meanwhile, I got better at it, and I discovered that I really liked these golden melody harps. And I had no idea why until years later when someone told me, yeah, these are tuned to equal temperament. And the other harmonicas were tuned sort of either just intonation, which is the way they used to tune them. Oh, I should have gotten my just intonation harp. It's in the basement. Or some sort of compromise tuning, because the chords don't sound in tune on here, but single note melodies do. And also the sides being closed give the tone a little bit of a rounder sound. And I believe it sort of, well, it doesn't help you get overblows more easily, but in some way it does. I never adjusted the reeds on the harmonica. I didn't know you could do it. I mean, like I said, even these were put together with nails. You took the nails apart, forget it. So, but that's how the whole thing started. And then within a month or two after, I guess this was like maybe December of 1969 that I figured this out. And then in early 70, I realized that you could get the high notes that were missing by doing the same thing, by drawing. Like the 7th hole would give you a half step higher than, and the 9th hole, and even the 10th hole, you give you the half step above, and then the 1st hole was very hard to sustain. It took me years to be able to figure out how to do that. I just used it in passing. I'd use it like that, but I wouldn't hit it as a sustained note until years later. So that's basically, how it happened. And then it's just a matter of how hard did I want to work at this to make it, a more complete musical instrument. And, I'll narrate that but I think you should ask me something. I've talked enough.
So I'm interested, given all that you've just said, fast forward to the year 2020, and the accessibility of information about the harmonica, the world has changed so much, and all this information's out there, and everyone's talking about these overblows, this word that you came up with, and of course people around the world are playing them now, and more people are experimenting with the harmonica. What's that like for you, kind of seeing that? And you must see some of it because you run an online school, right?
Oh yeah, no, it's very funny. I have several different feelings about it. One, in the beginning, I felt like I was like Christopher Columbus or Thomas Edison or something. Like I had discovered something. I was an explorer, and all the stuff I was finding, I was the only one doing it. Now, I know that there are a few isolated recordings of people squeaking out on Overblow before, but I didn't know that at all until relatively recently. And I know that Will Scarlett experimented trying to play everything on one harmonica in the mid-'60s, just before I figured this out. But he stopped doing it because he didn't think it sounded good. And now, if you listen to him play, he just plays very traditional blues. He doesn't use them at all. He's actually kind of a genius inventor. That's another topic. But so in the beginning, I felt alone and also very excited because I was the first. But it was a little bit lonely, and I did teach a few people how to do this in the late 70s, I think. That was my first student in Chicago who learned how to do it. And then I started teaching at a place in the summer in West Virginia called Augusta. And a whole bunch of really good harmonica players came there to study with me. Carlos Del Junco, Sandy Weltman, Pete Hastings, Roscoe Selly, Paul Metzer, a whole bunch of guys. And, I taught all this stuff to them, and they were excited to be there. They felt like they were experiencing something revolutionary. But it was in person. And the first time I taught not in person was I made an instructional video for a company called Homespun in 1992. It's called New Directions for Harmonica. So that was my first instructional video where people could learn, by buying something. And but it's still, the overblowing thing was still looked at with suspicion by a lot of blues players because they thought, Little Walter didn't do it, it can't be good, that kind of stuff, or that people were using these notes in ignorant ways just because they knew they could get a note and it didn't sound good, or they were doing them out of tune. That was one of the reasons I was afraid to make a video. I was afraid, people would just sound terrible doing this, and they say, "Who the hell taught you how to play like that?" And they go, "Howard Levy," and they go, "Oh, he must be terrible." So I was reluctant for years to make a video for that reason. But I found that after a while, people in other countries, places not America and not blues players, would just hear me play and go, "Oh, that's great! I can do all sorts of things in harmonica I didn't know I could do before. Isn't that cool?" Mm. But it's not just about technique. I mean, sure, I've innovated technique, but it's the reason I'm drawn to the instrument is that it's so soulful. This instrument is unlike any other. It is so alive. It's so minimal. It's like an extension of your body when you play it. It's like singing. And the whole idea of people saying to me, "Why don't you play the chromatic harmonica?" I go, "Well, I don't like the way it sounds. It's not the same instrument. It's like putting frets on a violin." No, the beauty of the violin is it doesn't have frets, and you have this elasticity and this flexibility that you can, it's so personal. And so the harmonica is the same thing, even though we got obviously 20 reeds and they're separated from each other, and you can't do everything to every reed, but still, it's amazingly personal and flexible and soulful. And so I devoted a lot of time to finding, the sweet spots in different keys. After a while, I decided that, well, why just play blues in cross harp? I mean, basically a C harmonica is just like the white keys of a piano. So when I found out about modes from studying jazz, I thought, oh, well, I could play in D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, which is cross harp, A Aeolian. You can play in all these different keys on this little instrument, which most harmonica players just play in like 1 or 2 positions. There are 7 that are given to you, so why not play them? So I started playing, minor key jazz tunes. Here's a C. I'll stick to the G harp. Something like Autumn Leaves in. See, I'm seeing a piano keyboard in my mind as I play. And that is really more than 90% of what I'm doing. The mechanical thing, of course, is a big part of it. And I'm continuing to learn things mechanically, but it's the visualization of the keyboard. That's the key to. So I can do this in any key. But that is what's called Aeolian mode, like E minor on a G harp, relative major, relative minor of G, rather. You could also play it in A minor, which is 3rd position. Or you can play it in B minor, 5th position.
Wow.
Also, I could play it in F minor. It doesn't matter, because one of the things that I do, which, I've evolved over the years. In the beginning, it was like, what's the best key harmonica to play this on? And now it's like, what I do is I transpose things to all 12 keys on piano. I'll take a Bach invention and play it in all 12 keys by ear.
Right.
And so transpose jazz tunes, which as a jazz pianist, you have to be able to do that if you're playing with singers. Some singer will come up and say, I want to sing Autumn Leaves in A flat minor. You have to play it in A flat minor. You can't go, oh, it's not the key it's written in. No, it's like the singer wants to sing it in the key, and she's the leader of the gig, and you got to play it in that key, And so I had a lot of experience with that. So after a while, I'm trying to bring the level of this up to the level of this. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, I wasn't really thinking that way. It was more like 2 separate things that I did. And then more I realized that, people were hiring me to play harmonica. They said, wow, this guy can play anything. Here, play this. And I'd look at it and go, well, I don't know how to play that. My God, how the hell am I going to play this? So a lot of on-the-job training,
Yeah. So I think there's still something that I don't quite understand. So I'd love for you to explain. So I kind of get, you're saying you think of you're kind of visualizing the piano almost, and I can
Yep.
understand that
Not,
with
not almost. I
yeah.
am.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of understand you visualizing the piano with one key of harmonica, but then if you're not always playing the same key of harmonica, does that just mean you've memorized all those different relationships of any given key of harmonica to the piano, or how does that work?
Well, that's a very complicated question because I also read pretty well, very well actually, on harmonica.
Okay.
And I've trained myself how to read on very well on about 5 different ones. But when I visualize the piano, I'm always seeing it when I'm playing jazz, usually anyway, as if it were a G harmonica because that was the first one I bought.
Okay.
Even though I can read on a C harmonica, I can read on a B flat, I can read on an A, I can read on a D. Those are the main ones I can read on well. Read on an F pretty well. Somehow my mind is transposing it to the key of as if, well, no matter what key harmonica I'm playing, I'm transposing it as if I were playing a G harmonica, which is really weird. So I can do both things.
Yeah.
And since I also had a lot of training in reading on the spot, playing on a lot of commercials in Chicago in the 80s and early 90s. I did over 1,000 of them on many instruments, mostly harmonica. So you get there, and there's a piece of music sitting on your stand, or 5 pieces of music, whatever, and you look at it and go, let's see, what's the best harmonica to play this on? Or, like, it's a country tune and it modulates 4 times in 59.8 seconds. It's like, okay, let's see. Start out a D harp, go to an E harp, and go to an F harp. I have all my harps lined up. And if I can sing the melody, doesn't matter what key harmonica it's on. So if you hear it and can sing it and follow the flow of the notes, you should be able to play it. And as the harmonica player on recording sessions, you're always looked at with great skepticism by the guys who play, quote, real instruments. And they're looking at you like, oh, yeah, here's this kid, because I was just a kid at the time. Like, no one even talked to me for about the first 20 sessions I did. They wanted to make sure that I was somebody who, if they talked to me, they wouldn't be like, making a terrible mistake by being friendly to this dummy playing the harmonica. And after a while, like, hey, Howard, nice to see you again, because they see, like, I could get it right in 2 takes or 3 takes, just like they could, So a lot of my improvement was because I was being hired to do stuff that was pushing my abilities, and I had to respond,
Yeah. I think, you kind of, going back to the start of your discovery of overblows, etc., you kind of said, well, it was kind of logical to try, well, if I can't get on a draw, can I get on a blow? But I think there's great vision and curiosity in your discoveries, because every other harmonica player before that had essentially gone, well, I can't get those notes, that's it, and hadn't done that. So I'm kind of fascinated that you stuck with it and you said, no, I'm bloody well going to get those notes out of this instrument, and lo and behold, this many years later, you've kind of done it all.
Yeah, well, it really is. Like I said, it was exciting, and it felt like a personal mission, and to be doing something that nobody else had ever thought of, and it sounded good.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, if it didn't sound good, who cares? And I always tell people, like, yeah, if you want to play a harmonica in alternate tuning or whatever you want to do, if it sounds good, fine. Yeah. I experimented with alternate tunings because I know how to tune reeds. I actually know how to replace reeds, which is like not fun. But especially now that I'm playing mostly customized harmonicas made by Joe Falisco, mostly he started making harmonicas for me, I want to say 1993 or 94. Before that, I just played straight out of the box, usually Golden Melodies. sometimes Marine bands. And I had him give me some lessons. Like, man, how do you tune a reed? I had no idea you could even do it. It was, learning about the inner workings of the instrument was fascinating.
Mm.
But with these customized instruments, they're expensive. You don't just like go to a music store and get one. So if I was out on the road, I had to learn how to tune. Stuff started going out of tune. I better be able to tune. And then after a while, I learned how to replace reeds, which is like, Joe gave me lessons on that. And I'm good at it. I'm not great at it. I'm not one of those guys who does work for other people. And I'm not by nature a very meticulous craftsman. I'm a little impatient. But just to survive, I had to learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the whole thing of eventually figuring out how the stuff works and realizing that you could adjust the reed clearances and make it easier instead of, it doesn't work on this harmonica. It's like, are you idiot? I mean, I spent years thinking it doesn't work on this harmonica, it works on this harmonica. I never opened them up and messed around. I was an idiot. I think of all the money and the time I spent, buying harmonicas that didn't work. They work. So, just as, my vision and positive qualities that made me discover these things worked in my favor, my lack of mechanical curiosity and ability held me back until other people showed me, like, this is how it works. I'm like, really? Yeah. Wow. I had no idea. Even how bends work. I didn't know. I think Mancat showed me that it's, the higher reed bends down, the lower reed bends up. It's like, I had no idea. And how the overblow works with the closing reed and that it's the opposite direction reed that's making the sound. It's like, I had no idea. Like I said, I'm a piano player. You press down a note and the sound comes. I didn't ever think about taking stuff apart and learning how it worked, because you can't do that with a piano. Yeah. So, but I have to say also, I did learn how to play a lot of other instruments as well. Because after I learned how to play harmonica and sounded good, in like a year, I was, doing all this stuff, a lot of this stuff. Thought, wow, maybe I could play other instruments I love, that my heroes play. And John Coltrane is my biggest jazz hero, my biggest musical hero, just about, him and Bach. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, wow, maybe I could learn saxophone. This would be amazing. So a friend of mine lent me a sax, and I got a fingering chart, and I learned how to play sax, soprano first and then tenor, and then alto eventually. And I wasn't, like, by any means a great saxophone player, but I had a good sound. And I also learned a lot about the natural overtone series, playing the sax. And then other instruments followed. This is when I was like 19 and 20. The year after I started playing harmonica when I was 18. I started playing mandolin, guitar, flute, hand drums, African balafon, which is like a marimba. And it continued, I continued adding other instruments, all different kinds of flutes, ocarinas. And I felt that I was learning about music through the instruments, And so if I watch a band play with guys who are playing instruments I know how to play, I can see what they're playing on the guitar, on bass, on saxophone, trumpet, brass instruments. I don't know how to play. I understand the basic concept, but I don't play brass instruments. But I've also studied drumming on my own too, lots of percussion, and I actually apply it to harmonica playing. Which is very interesting. Do you want to hear about that?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Well, see, drumming, you have your right hand and your left hand, and drummers practice what's called rudiments. Do you know about this?
A little bit, but we've got all sorts of people watching, so it's worth talking the basics.
Let me put this iPad a little bit lower, and so you can see my hands. Somehow or other, I have to.
Yeah.
I'll back up and play a make-believe drum here. So
Okay.
let's see.
we go.
So, I mean, you have your left hand single stroke roll, and then you've got your double stroke roll, which with sticks is eventually how drummers play things that sound like, because they're doing, but they're managing to do it in a quick way and blurring it together. And then you have your other primary rudiment, I mean, there's many, which is the paradiddle, which is right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. It's hard for me to do it at this angle. So right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. And this is sort of a little bit of a mind-expanding thing. A lot of people can't do this right away. It turns out violinists do this. The bow going up and down is very similar to, it's called the double shuffle. And so I was watching, actually my son, his drum lessons, and I thought, the harmonica, we have the blow and the draw. I could think of that as the right and left hands. So if I want to do a double stroke roll, let's say, how would that apply? And I realized that the bounce of the stick, you have one stroke and a bounce. Mm-hmm. That's like blow and slide to the next hole. So that's a double stroke roll. 4 blow, this is a B flat harp. 4 blow, 5 blow. 5 draw, 4 draw. But the difference between the harmonica and drums is that with drums, it's harder to get a bounce after one stroke. With harmonica, the fewer breath changes you have, the faster you can play. I mean, obviously that's very fast, but a triple stroke roll on drums is, on harmonica. Nothing to it. If you keep your mouth neutral and breathe from your diaphragm and support it, instead of pushing, that's the mistake a lot of people make, is they blow and draw instead of just breathing through the harmonica. Well, that's very easy to play a bunch of arpeggios if you support your breath right. But the paradiddle is really interesting. So it's right, left, right, right. So it's blow, slide, draw, blow, draw, slide. If I start from the first hole, it's like spreading out the rudiment over several drums. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Like over, like between the snare and a tom or two toms. And drummers are spreading these rudiments out all the time over 2 hands and 2 feet. This is something they practice, all the possible numerical right and left hand, right and left foot combinations. So this is the simplest one, just 2-hole paradiddle. And if I stand up, you can see my stomach is moving in and out.
Yeah.
It's all supported from there. I'm not huffing and puffing. Everything is smooth. And so part of the reason I discovered this was hearing John Popper play it. He was playing at warp speed, and I realized after a while this is what he's doing. He's basically approaching the instrument as a percussion instrument. And it's all like these incredibly smooth execution of breathing patterns that are like rhythmic breathing patterns. So I call these rhythmic breathing rudiments. And it helped me, to develop speed on my playing in a way where I'm not thinking about specific notes, exactly the opposite of the way I visualize the piano. All I'm thinking about is applying rhythm to a bunch of holes. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you can add bends and overblows and all sorts of stuff to it.
Yeah. So how did so for anyone who hasn't seen you live, you'll sometimes play something, you'll be playing the piano and the harmonica simultaneously, and you might be playing some bebop stuff or whatever, on kind of on both at once. How did that kind of come about?
I started playing in bands where I was playing both instruments, especially with the fleg tones. So I would play something in the studio. Sometimes I developed the ability to do this, partially playing solo shows as well, with the G harmonica mostly. That's the only one I brought in the room, sorry. So I see it. But sometimes self-accompanying. So I'm playing what I would be playing with with my right hand on the harmonica, and comping with the left. And then sometimes I play unison things. Whoops. I've recorded some pretty nice solos in unison on Trio Globo, Steering by the Stars album especially, and some other ones too. So it's a very unique sound, and I've always felt, not always, but most of the time, I don't like technical gadgetry, because some of the stuff I do doesn't sound like possible. And if I started using like all sorts of weird pedals and stuff, people would just think that what I'm doing is due to technology instead of just myself. I like to make the most out of the least. And so some of the tone blocking techniques that I've figured out are like that. These things. That idea. All that stuff. All those techniques. That I've figured out on low car rides.
It's like the sort of drone underneath sort of thing, almost.
Well, drone and counterpoint.
Yeah.
Things like that, and all sorts of things. I just always asking questions of myself. Hey, how about if I, and then I do it. But also being a musician on the road is that really does help your evolution. I remember I went through one period with the Flecktones when we were opening for Chicago, which is a huge band, and we had our 28.5 minutes that we did. And then we would have to sit around and wait for them to finish their show. And then the next day we drive 500 miles to do it again, and, it wasn't very gratifying because we weren't really playing long enough to get warmed up even. And I had a lot of time on my hands and lots of long bus rides. So I started practicing lying in my bunk bed in the bus. I had these Jamie Aebersold jazz tapes. They were on cassette, so I had a cassette player that had a vari-speed just to make sure that it was actually in tune. And I would practice like, okay, let's try these Duke Ellington tunes. The tape was like 70 or 80 minutes long and way too many courses of each one, but I said, let me try them on a B-flat harmonica. And I'd go through all, 75 minutes or whatever of this tape. I go, this tune works well on the B-flat harmonica. Let me make a note of that. Well, we have another 5 hours to go. Let me try it on an A harp. And I'd play them all on an A harp. And then I would play them all on an A flat harp. And, I was trying to use my time productively instead of just going, oh man, I'm so bored, or, maybe I'll read a book or watch a movie. I was practicing. because I realized this time was a gift,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it was a little bit random, but it forced me to do it. And I was, learning all sorts of stuff about playing in keys that I normally would never play in. And yeah, there's been a few times in my life where certain things, as a result of traveling, certain things happened that were influential on me. I'm actually writing my memoirs that focus on musical things. Oh, did you want to ask me about my harmonica school?
Yeah. So how does that work? And what kind of things do you teach? And yeah, what's going on?
Well, the harmonica school, it's the brainchild of this really brilliant guy, David Butler, who was also one of the main developers of AOL 1.0 and Instant Messenger. He's kind of a smart guy. And his wife, Patricia, is really pretty much the president of the company, and she's wonderful. They both love music, and have devoted their whole lives to building up this collection of schools, which is basically a virtual music conservatory, including free music theory school for every member who joins, and a free art school. All sorts of amazing stuff. And so the basic idea is that I pre-recorded a lot of lessons, but at every level. And so we have divided it into 3 levels: basic, intermediate, and advanced. And that's the way they do all their schools. And I said, okay, on the harmonica, how can I make these divisions? And so I came up with the simplest way that I could think. Basic, anything in the basic section doesn't require the ability to bend notes. There's a lot of stuff you can play on harmonica without bending notes, especially if you play in all 7 naturally occurring positions. You can play all sorts of things, like 12th position, like C on a G harp. I'm trying not to bend.
You couldn't resist.
Like most people, that's the funny thing. That key, I have to digress. The key of the 5th hole draw. Before I came along, I don't know if anyone played diatonic harmonica in that key. And there's 2 reasons for it. One is that the just intonation tuning made that note incredibly flat, like 25 or 30 cents flat, to be able to play the chords in tune. But also, nobody had conceptualized, the sound. And I didn't play any overblows or anything. It's just a really cool sound. And you can play Georgia. It's just beautiful,
Yeah.
without any overblows. But it naturally plays the Lydian mode with the sharp 4th. And to be able to get the 4th, you have to be able to play the 6th hole overblow in this octave. And bend it there. And I love that key. It sounds sort of saxophonistic. And it's part of, I play the saxophone. So when I'm playing jazz and jazzy things, sometimes I'm visualizing the instrument not as just a piano keyboard or something that has 10 holes and 20 reeds, but as a single column of air with finger holes. I'm thinking like a horn player. it is a harmonica, but people say, "Wow, that doesn't sound like a harmonica." Well, it does, but people didn't know a harmonica could sound that way.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you play in a different key, the bends are in a different place in relation to the tonic. For example, if you want to play in the Phrygian mode on this B harp, G harp, which is B. Like Middle Eastern music, so much of it has that flat second. The first octave, that slide between the flat second and the flat third. If you're playing in cross harp, it's between the flat seventh and the tonic. Middle Eastern. You can do that and even get quarter tones. So it's the same bend, but it functions differently. You know. Some people think that doesn't sound like a harmonica. Well, yeah, sure it does. Mm-hmm. If you think of the harmonica as being a Middle Eastern instrument, that key, and then even like A flat. Half step above the key of the harp. It just, every key fills me with delight because each one of them has its own personality and flavor, and still sounds totally fresh to me every time I play in one of these, other keys that are further away from the root from the either first or second position on the instrument. And there's just.
I was just going to say it's refreshing and inspiring to hear you talk about the instrument, because although you've clearly got a love for the instrument is clearly a vehicle to making sounds and playing music and playing different styles of music that you're interested in and that you love. So I'd like to finish with one more question, just kind of asking you, given the range of stuff you play and the range of instruments that you've learned, what's exciting you now musically? I mean, are you still exploring new avenues, or does it always come back to jazz and classical stuff for you?
There's always new avenues within places that you've been. Mm-hmm. For starters, and I'm always writing new things on piano and harmonica. There's an infinite amount left, in the finite time I have. I take great delight in teaching people on my harmonica school. And by the way, I forgot to tell you that anyone who's a member can make a short video and send it to me of something that they're working on. Yeah. And I respond with a video. And the pair of videos is able to be viewed by everybody at the school. And like mini master classes, so everyone learns from everyone else, which is one of the greatest functions, one of the greatest components of the school, because David, came up with this idea. And so I'm learning from my students, they're learning from me, and they're learning from each other. It's just great. But as far as music is just infinite. There's an infinite number of combinations. I'm always learning new stuff. I come up with different theories about rhythm, and I have 3 incomplete books right now. One of them is about combining modes and odd time meters together to get musicians more comfortable improvising in odd time meters, which has nothing to do with the harmonica. It's just music on any instrument. And I pretty much have the whole thing written. Just have to get all the musical examples into Finale, and then be ready to publish it, into computer music notation. Because I write music by hand still. Yeah. It's I just can't master the computer music notation. And I've made a very extensive exploration of John Coltrane's Giant Steps and figured out the math behind it. And I've given lectures about it at colleges and jazz conventions. It's just, the teaching thing and the composing and the performing, they all feed into each other. But now that there's no performing for the foreseeable future, I'm just very grateful that you called me and that so much musical knowledge and musicality can be transmitted online, and that people can learn from each other this way, because human beings have just an innate desire to communicate and to share. And that's to me, what music's about. I love sharing, whether it's a performance or teaching. So thank you very much for doing this. And I hope that what I had to say will turn some people on to, playing things they maybe hadn't thought of before, and maybe get a few new people playing the harmonica.
I think it definitely will. Thank you so much for sharing all you have with me today. And I will put a link to your website and to your school, your online school. And once there's a book out, whenever that is in the future, I'll put a link to that as well, whenever that might be. And
well, actually, I do have a book out.
Well, I'll put a link to that as well.
Yes, and thanks to my wife who made that happen. And like I said, I'm writing my memoirs too, so I have about 60 stories so far that I put down of all of my most interesting musical experiences, many of which are very funny.
Well, I look forward to reading it. I'll definitely get hold of that when it's out. And I highly recommend people join your school, because I was a member of your school years ago. I played a passable version of All of Me with your help and encouragement and feedback. So, and I never thought that would happen. So, yeah, I definitely recommend it, and I'll put a link to that, and I'm sure that people will get a lot out of this. Yeah, really, really, really appreciate your time.
Sure. And especially in this day and age when, like I said, this is pretty much it for musical communication. So,
yeah,
this is like a golden opportunity to focus on something to improve yourself, and as long as you pay attention to the outside world and stay safe, and follow all the guidelines, the strictest ones, because we can't mess around with this virus. It's really very deadly, and if people, especially young people, think, "Oh, I'll live forever," well, not necessarily. You got to protect yourself and wear a mask. Don't hug your friends. Don't just hang out on the street and say, "Hey, how's it going?" I mean, this is life and death.
Yeah.
So I can't emphasize that more strongly. So it's a tough time. So hopefully most of us will get through it. Well, I have to say one more thing, just that you could put in. A lot of harmonica players don't know the notes they're playing, because this instrument is invisible. It's the only instrument that the player who's playing it cannot see and has no fingerings on. Think of the beside the bugle. This is it. And so a lot of harmonica players just play by feel, kind of like riding a bicycle, And the thought of knowing what notes you're playing on this instrument is very foreign, especially to blues players. So in order to advance past playing just basic blues, if you want to, sometimes it's fine. If all you want to do is play blues and second position, that's cool. But if you want to advance to being able to understand what, how to play over chord changes or, anything else, you got to learn what notes you're playing and have a rudimentary ability to pick out some stuff on a keyboard, because there's no special skill involved in pushing the key down, and also, learn how to read music a little. You don't have to be like, Franz Liszt or anything, but knowing where the little dots are on the page does help.
Yeah.
Anything that helps you be able to see this instrument piano or guitar. An instrument that it's visual. So I just want to make that point clear that it's a really big help.
Yeah, that's important.
Okay, thanks so much for asking me to do this.
Well, thank you. Stay well.
Thank you.
Take care. Cheers, Howard.
Okay.
Bye.